Let's go back to KZN now and the violent protests that are spiraling out of control in different parts of that province. Jacob Zuma's supporters are demanding his release from jail. Well, let's talk about it some more with Mary Haas from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She's been researching violence in the province, political violence, since the early 1980s. Mary, good afternoon, and thanks so much for your time. And as we've just said, you have widely researched, you have observed political protests and violence, especially in KwaZulu-Natal through the decades. Do you see the protests that we are seeing now, the violence that we are seeing now, reaching those levels that we saw back then? Or do you think this is just short-lived, just sort of Zuma supporters just showing some muscle, some bravado? Or do you think this has the potential to really get out of control and do more damage?
Look, it's violence of a different order. It's primarily protest, but very destructive process. Obviously, it can block roads, can stone motorists, it can set fire to stuff, it can interfere with infrastructure, water, electricity provision. And I think one has to remember that this may have sparked the protest, but I mean, we have enough protest over service delivery already, ironically, linked to those Zuma years when things just went from indifferent to bad to worse. So he is to blame for it, or he and his government. I mean, it's not just him. But, I mean, you know, municipalities are already dysfunctional. District municipalities, local municipalities, and you can take advantage of this. And you can look at the wider picture too, that this is a party. You must remember he's not the only one. There's Ace Magashule, for example. And, it's crystallizing around Zuma. And, I mean, eThekwini is controlled by Zuma supporters who got in at the last election, led by the former mayor, Zandile Gumede, who's also been suspended. So there's a group of very dissatisfied politicians. And this KwaZulu-Natal is the main ANC support base in the country. And, I mean, eThekwini is the largest, the metro is the largest voting bloc. So what this is another symptom of these divisions. And it's about party politics, basically, with Zuma, of course, fueling the flames of it because he has a lot of supporters. I mean, it was a relief to know there were police from all over the country. It was very well organized on, the night he finally handed himself in, very tense. But you had to use national intelligence and police because we don't know. I mean, it was the Zuma years that virtually ruined intelligence capacity in the police. There's a lot of Zuma support. So there's a whole lot of things contributing to this. And don't forget, there's a lot of weapons in this country. Maybe they're even stashed in the bunker at eNCA. We don't know. And, of course, Zuma has the taxi networks at his control.
So,
some of them are very close relatives of him, and taxi associations are behind him. You can destabilize the whole country.
Yeah. So, Mary, with everything that you've just laid out for us and the potential here for how much worse this can actually get, what should the KZN government itself be doing now to prevent this from becoming even more explosive? I mean, we already heard them say yesterday, calling for Zuma supporters to demonstrate peacefully, but it might be a little too late. I think the sort of spark has been lit already, the fuse has been lit already, would you say? But how can they regain control of the situation then? They are also caught between factions in the ANC as well.
Government can, not the KwaZulu government, because don't forget that they are conflicted. The Minister of Police is conflicted because he's a senior member of the ANC. And yet he's got to effect the arrest of one of his very long-standing comrades. And, there's a hesitancy on the part of ANC politicians to be seen to be targeting Zuma. And that goes because the ANC in this province is still very divided. So, you've got to look at that. I mean, the only people who can really intervene to stop this are the police, the intelligence, and you've got to do this with people from elsewhere in the country, because we don't know after all these years how many of the police are sympathetic to Zuma. So what you've got to do is, and you've got to have well-trained police. You don't want you don't want what you've seen. And I mean, even with the COVID regulations, they've done dreadful things. You know, the way they've gone and shot people with rubber bullets. We don't want that. You know, there are ways, and unfortunately, the minister himself sat on a report for 5 years, which the Marikana, the aftermath of Marikana, the expert panel report was not released until this year, which should have been released. People should have been properly trained. So we're sitting with badly trained police in people like public order policing. The positive is, though, that at last we have a really good professional policeman as commissioner here, well trained, and so that's a big plus factor. But as I said, I mean, you've got to start with intelligence. You've got to find out. We know who these people are. You've got to start arresting. There's a heck of a lot on social media with very clear incitement. I mean, on Wednesday, I was sitting on tenterhooks until midnight because there was very overt incitement against the police. Now, you don't do that. You don't say to the police, we'll kill you if you arrest him, because you're asking for it. So, I mean, all those people inciting, all those people breaking the COVID laws, firing guns at each other, you've got to get in and arrest them. You've got to go for the people who are organising these protests. Yeah. You know, and it's not difficult. It's difficult in the sense that this has been allowed to go on for years.
But Mary, is there the political will to do that in KZN? Is there the political will to actually do that in KZN then, at the moment?
I think, you know, I mean, we know, it's common knowledge, I think, that the government is a divided House. I mean, I have seen very encouraging signs because I don't look at what politics say. I look at changes in institutions, whether it's the civil service, whether it's the police, and I'm seeing changes there. I'm seeing finally attempts to deal with, even with corruption in health, for example, which has been going on for years. So there's that sort of, I think it's in a very difficult position because, I mean, obviously, no one wants to split the ANC, and I doubt that will happen for various reasons. But I think the people that are behind the president want to make sure he stays in place. So it's got to be handled with care, and that's why I say if you can leave it to, you know, if you can, I mean, like, you know, the president can't go in and say, hey, you've got to implement that court order, because then he will be seen to be, you know, politically leaving it. You've got to leave it to the courts and to the police to implement that court order, for example. Okay. Now, I doubt, I mean, I've been saying for years, if you want to deal with this nonsense, you've got to look at how well armed the security companies are that are guarding taxis, for example. You've got to deal with the taxi industry, because that's where a lot of this is grounded, including in the head. But there's no political will to do that. You see, you, as a colleague of mine says, the best political analyst I know, a very old friend, Paul Zuma, it's all the politics of expedience. It's really difficult to forecast. You see, you're not talking about political positions, you're talking about vested economic interests in security companies, in taxis, in tenders. So, I mean, it's very difficult to get a united government action in that position. So my sense is that they may want to deal with it, but they're just not sure how to deal with it. I hope they have a plan. Heaven help us if they don't have a plan.